born in Berlin, Germany in 1937, and spent a very happy childhood in both Switzerland and Germany, mostly in Germany. In 1932, as I'm sure you all know, Adolf Hitler came to power, and a very trying period ensued for members of the Jewish faith. Eventually, because we were lucky enough to have family in the United States, we managed to immigrate, and I arrived in New York and spent 4 years in New York in rather menial jobs because I was just a high school graduate, and then was drafted and was assigned as a city boy from New York who had only seen horses off and on, was assigned to the horse cavalry. This was incidentally the division which made George Custer famous, and some of my friends have jokingly said that I was probably the last survivor of Custer's last stand. But it was a little bit before my time. I received my basic training in Kansas and was subsequently transferred to El Paso, Texas, where the 1st Cavalry Division was stationed. And in those days, the regular army, at least the ones in the 1st Cavalry, were composed of refugees from the Dust Bowl, from Texas and Oklahoma, who were excellent horsemen, whereas I was strictly a neophyte. Well, I managed to ride a horse military style, but because of my academic background, I was fairly literate in those days. I was assigned as a personnel clerk, but I felt that my proficiencies were not properly exploited because I was a speaker of 2 languages and more later on of English and German. And so I tried to get into military intelligence, but I wasn't a citizen. I became a citizen only in 1943. I was frustrated in that endeavor until such time that I became a citizen, and then was sent to Fort Bullis near San Antonio, Texas, where I received the interrogation of prisoner of war training, abbreviated IPW. I did very well, but I returned to the 1st Cavalry until such time that we went on maneuvers in North Louisiana, and there I was grabbed without any previous knowledge on my part, and was transferred to to POB 1142. And there I was placed in charge of a contingent of enlisted men who transcribed, monitored interrogations of naval personnel. At that time, interrogations were only conducted by commissioned officers. I stayed at Fort Bullis, I stayed at POB 1142 for about half a year. The secrecy was very strict. I didn't know where I was until I entered Fort Hunt. I was assigned, as I mentioned before, to supervise the record that was established by the people working with me. They transcribed the monitored interrogations and checked them out with the officers who had performed these interrogations.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, George, could you also explain, because we haven't mentioned it, you mentioned about monitored conversations. Could you explain what that means? Because a lot of folks might not be familiar with that.
Sorry. The I never saw anything but my immediate bailiwick. I never saw any prisoners. I never watched an interrogation. I just received the records, the recordings that were gained from interrogating these German naval prisoners, and they were then processed and sent on. That was the extent of it, really, and it was only after I went to Fort Ritchie when my military career really blossomed. And then, for reasons unknown to me, I was transferred to Camp Ritchie. And at Camp Ritchie, I was asked to join the faculty and lecture on German military subjects for the duration of my stay at Fort Ritchie until I was transferred to Europe. I was transferred to Europe after my stint as a member of the German language faculty at Fort Ritchie, and I was assigned eventually to a mobile field interrogation unit, a interrogation unit that operated at Army group level. The Army group was commanded by General Bradley, and I had sort of a tripartite responsibility with a major focus on the interrogation of prisoners of war. And it was strategic interrogation which spanned a wide bracket of activities. For instance, did a study on the effects of strategic bombing on the lines of communications in Germany, but I also had a rather mundane job helping to assess the effects of trench foot on winter warfare and the prisoners who were located at the station at which I operated. My initial duty station was in Stenay, a small town in northern France, which was close to the Belgian border and about 25 kilometers north of Verdun. And at Stenay, we worked in this strategic capacity until the armistice was signed, and in 1945 we crossed the border into Germany and did a long walk with various intermissions where we simply staged, which means we did nothing, and until such time that after the Potsdam Conference we were assigned to the American sector in Berlin. And there we performed interrogations of not only captured military personnel, but also famous and highly reputed Germans such as Professor Sauerbruch, who was a splendid doctor, medical doctor, and others. Also, and this was a very hapless episode. A famous German geopolitician whose son was murdered by the Nazis because he was remotely involved in the attempt at Hitler's life.